busy.
All right. Surf's up, everybody, apparently today, even in Bend, Oregon. Welcome to Bending Rules with Pete and Eric, and where we talk all things entrepreneurial. And kind of qualifying that a little bit, I mean, we really want to talk about entrepreneurial stories, right? So we have, a gentleman with us today, Justin Johnson, who has done a number of different tech orientated startups with some good results and probably some that didn't have great results. And we're going to hear about those too. And the idea is that, you can walk away with something that might help you make a better decision in your own investments, your own endeavors. And if we can do that, we've accomplished something I think pretty cool for everybody. So, Justin, so prior to us getting started, Justin he sent us an article, and it was an article that had a motivating sort of input into your basically decision to become an entrepreneur. And probably had something prior to that in your DNA that kind of led to this. But there were a lot of great things about that article. And the name of the article was "Eat What You Can Kill," right?
Yeah. Life tastes better when you eat what you kill.
Thank you. Yeah, I even got the title wrong, but I took away some points from it, and there were a lot. So I was more like looking at this article, like, well, what were the things that really motivated you in that article?
Sure.
To decide, like, even if you weren't doing that at that time of your life, to sort of take that direction with your own life.
Right.
Okay. Right. And then I'd love to hear obviously about something prior to that, but it seemed like a good starting point to me. Yeah. And you can kind of lean in on some of those points. So tell us what.
Yeah. It's, it was an article that I'm not sure how I came across it. James Arturo is the author. It was an article that was titled "Life Tastes Better When You Eat What You Kill." And it's a crude article, but it essentially breaks down the entrepreneur journey. And for some people, not everyone, life truly tastes better when you eat what you kill, which means you go out every morning and you hunt and you find business, you create partnerships, and there's really no one telling you what to do every day. So that's the journey that I fell in love with. I didn't know it was even possible.
Did you have a company at that point, or were you?
No,
this is pre-idea of any sort of.
Sitting on the 23rd floor in downtown Seattle at Russell Investments.
Okay.
Not in a cubicle. I had an incredible view of Elliott Bay, right? And it was a situation where, I didn't come from an entrepreneur background. My mom was a middle school music teacher. My father was an executive in the government. Really didn't see a lot of risk anywhere as I was growing up. We did what we did, and we lived, comfortably. And there's just, I really do think that there's that DNA, that bone in the entrepreneur, the true entrepreneur that's going to go and chase it. That, you can push off for a while, and maybe you're not truly happy in that day job, but I didn't like to have a boss. I didn't function well in a corporate environment. I was talented and I was skilled at what I did, but I didn't enjoy going to work every day. And there's a lot of people that do that, or aren't, don't want to take the risk to step out of it. And that's part of the reason we're here, right? Not to encourage that, but to show that side of the road in the risks we took. Because I'll never forget the day that I quit and went. I mean, I had 2 pictures. I remember posting it on social media. It's like at Russell Investments, sitting on the 23rd floor, had this beautiful view of Elliott Bay and incredibly comfortable. This is the type of company that put in 15% of your salary towards your retirement every year. Like, who leaves that? That's not about stock. That's not up and down. That's not a golden carrot. That is straight here. And people stay there forever.
Yeah.
And then I looked at that road and said, wow, look what this could be. And I remember taking a picture of, my co-working space with a brick wall and no windows. And then, the Elliott Bay view. And I just thought to myself, this is it. This is me.
Yeah.
I don't care where I am or.
How long have you been there at that point?
How long I had been at Russell? I mean, I had 20 years of corporate jobs before then. I'd been there for 7 years.
Yes, that's a long time. Like, you're pretty far down.
Yep. Sabbatical was the next year.
Down the path.
For 3 months, right?
Sabbatical
next year. Right? It's like, take 3 months off, go do your thing after 7 years.
The carrots got bigger and
Absolutely.
And you left before the sabbatical.
I did.
Yeah.
Because it just didn't matter enough.
I want to point one thing out just for people to listen to some of these podcasts before. And this goes back into the pattern recognition, also maybe not even being something that's that important, and that is like, this is you too, to some extent, and me too.
Yeah.
And now you're the third. Entrepreneurial backgrounds with not families that are entrepreneurial or risk taking in their own sort of profile. But then you have Chris Capdevilla that was on the other week, and he had sort of that risk taking profile. So to me, that doesn't, for anybody to listen, that doesn't matter. That shouldn't be part of your decision whether you want to go down this path. If you've had super conservative parents, or that's been their career and they've loved that, awesome. Anyways, I just want to point that out because I didn't really know that about your background, because maybe that encourages you to go down a path for a while, but it's at some point maybe your true calling starts to reveal itself, you know?
But there's a caveat to that, and I think this is important.
Okay.
So I didn't quit my corporate job. I had 2 little kids, right?
Yeah.
Kelly at the time, my wife, had sort of taken off work to be able to do this. So it was the main income. And the mentality I always had, and I forget, somebody told me this at one point, to plan before you quit. Don't quit to plan. And I think that advice for everyone is so important, depending on your risk tolerance, because I know a ton of entrepreneurs who have said, oh, I can't wait to start my company. I'm going to quit this job, and I've got, $20,000 in the bank, and let's do this. And then they walk out of the front door and they're free. And now they have an idea, maybe a business plan, but there's nothing beyond that.
Yeah.
I had money. I had a company built, I had technology built, and I had customers before I walked. So there's a big difference between walking and starting and having that path already paved, and now I'm going to ramp.
Well, you were de-risking it.
De-risking the whole thing.
The whole way down the road.
I was not going to walk out of that place without money coming in.
And you were seeing those validation points along the way.
And then I had the pipeline where I knew I could get it from whatever, 50 to 200.
Part of that, though, Justin, is that you're at a place in your life, though, where you were making that kind of money, right? So some entrepreneurs much earlier in the curve, it's not staying in the job. They don't have kids or whatever. It doesn't really make sense for them to do that.
Yes.
I mean, I look at like Chris, again, going back to Chris Capdevilla, and he kind of did the same thing, right? He was at I think it was Pricewaterhouse, his consulting. He kind of generated this idea, and then he started working. He knew that his customers have a fit for. I don't think he got as far as you did. I didn't realize you had actually had customers and traction before you left. Oh, wow, you de-risked it quite a bit.
A lot.
I mean, you
That's
still
the only way I would
you
have
still
done
had
it.
a ways to go.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I mean, because that was pretty early in your cycle. Probably not a lot of revenue or anything like that. But you felt like, okay, there's enough.
It was decent. Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
It was enough.
It was enough. Yeah.
And I wouldn't have quit just in that situation just to plan.
Yeah,
I wouldn't have. So
was this your first company?
It was the first one.
Yeah.
I mean, I bought and sold domain names to put myself through grad school. So I had, that was a little bit of the taste.
Yeah.
Right? I was like, wait a minute, this is possible. I can see this.
Yeah.
This isn't easy, but this isn't that hard either.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's see what's next. And I started to dabble a little bit. And I knew I had the chops in technology, and I was always sort of on the development / product management side. So the mini CEO of a product, right? Always reporting to the CEO. So I had the P&L, and I knew, product market fit. You had to get that. So I'd gone through those motions multiple times in my career for 20 years.
Yeah.
So I knew, especially in the technology space, how to do it. I had the playbook.
Yeah. You did on the product side, but the rest of it was sort of new stuff, right? So I was like, I mean, Eric and I have talked about this for a little bit. I like to go back and kind of try to ascertain, like, what is someone's superpower in the business that they start.
Yep.
And, I think an entrepreneur, someone runs a business. I mean, you probably have many skills that you need to be good at because you're going to do a lot of jobs.
Yes.
But you always have some sort of superpower, right? And I kind of think I have an idea what I think is yours. And then you figure out, how do I complement those superpowers, right? So if I were asking that question, like what made you feel like you could do this? What skill did you have that others didn't, or that you were just better at? I mean, if that's a fair way to
It's a great question, and something that all entrepreneurs need to recognize. Like early in startups, or even later, founders have to do everything. It's just the way it is. Yeah. But what I recognized for myself is that I wasn't afraid to get on the phone and call people to understand their challenges, right? Had an idea, but you got to vet that idea. And there's so many entrepreneurs that just think just because it's a good idea to them means it's going to be a great idea and everyone's going to buy it. And that's probably the single point of failure for most businesses, I would say. And people are just afraid to get on the phone and validate things. And so, I had mock-ups and wireframes and all sorts of vaporware that I was sending out to customers, potential customers, and people I didn't no idea who they were. Hey, is this something that you're interested in? What is your core challenge? And I pivoted a lot of different ways, but it wasn't expensive. It wasn't an expensive pivot because it wasn't a product yet.
Yeah.
And then once I nailed it and I had customers saying, if you build this, I will pay you X amount. Some even got a contract for it. Because people can still BS their way all the way through just to get you off the phone.
Yeah.
But it's like, wow, okay. And then I give them weekly updates about where I was and what was happening. And they'd pivot. And then that's where, so the product market fit and understanding.
I got to interrupt you because here's the thing, like what he's saying right here, Eric, like for people that are at least doing the tech stuff. And then I never asked you the question on the superpower. So I'm going to ask, I want to know yours. And you can ask me mine. I was thinking about asking you. I got to figure out what is mine here. I've got some ideas, but what he's laying out for just anybody listening, because you went through it quickly and people, it's the blueprint for how to make it work. And this is why, like, I think trying to get advice from previous entrepreneurs and really going through that exercise, like, and so many people fail on those initial steps. Either they think their idea is bigger than it is. They do silly things like ask their customers to pay way too much money early, like, just because they've got a team or they got $5 million into it that some VC decided to throw into it. So they think they can go charge $200,000 a year for their product.
Right.
But the corporations sit there and they're like, well, I don't even know if I need this thing, or maybe I need like 15% of it. And you need to do all these other things. So then they move on to the next one thinking, oh, well, no, someone else will buy it, right? No, they don't. Like it's all this. It's all the roll up the sleeve stuff that happens when you go from a piece of paper
that's right.
to actually validating that I don't know. You're the first person to kind of lay it out with, you said it quickly, but like the prototype, the milestones with the customer, and then getting them to pay, before you really have the full product, maybe get a discount or whatever. Dude, it was kind of like, I had all these techniques for that to drive that with Manzama but instinctually I even had it earlier on.
Right.
It's kind of like Jeff's analogy with contracts, like you can get the real estate if you understand how to manipulate the contract. Don't let money be the obstacle.
He's really creative.
So Justin was like that. He was like super creative about getting his, getting your customer to kind of work with you and go forward.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's just, people really appreciate good people. That's the reality. I'm not saying I prefer myself as a good person. I hope so. But it's like having that mutual respect and asking the questions and not trying to push somebody on something, especially early on, right? It's like, can I help you with this? Oh, you know what? That is great. That would make my job better. And you know what? That might even make me look good to my boss. Great. We're on the same team here.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask a few things here.
Yeah.
As long as I can, I'll do this work and I'll build this for you. Here's the roadmap. Here's the schedule of what's going to happen. I'm going to ask you questions. I'm going to get this. But it's like, then you just build a relationship in your friends at that point. And the more you can do that, the more you can ask for people, whether it's product market fit or taking it to their boss to sign off or whatever. Yeah. But early on, that's the key.
Well, you also said like you weren't asking for money, you're asking for input.
That's it.
Right. So you're building a relationship by building the trust that you're going to deliver on whatever it is you have.
People
now
always want to give you
were able to do that and manage your job and probably fund it yourself at that point.
I did at the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah. That kind of takes us back to that eat what you kill article and zero sum thinking.
Yep.
The opposite of that is actually looking for a win-win for everybody. And, just because you're going to do well, that doesn't take away from somebody else's ability to do well also.
Exactly.
And so you're coming in and solving their problem, making them look good for their boss, and it helps you too. I mean, it doesn't have to be a win-lose.
That's right. And people are always willing to give you their expertise. That's what it really comes down to. I want to learn from you because I know you know a lot more about this than I do.
And by the way, that's all you have to offer at that
That's
point
all you have
in your time, which also was in the article. Like
totally,
when you're early in your career, just give advice for free.
Yep.
Right. I liked how it said that, and be that expert in that area and educate them. And it's probably a lost leader for you.
Yeah.
Frankly, some of those early customers, because you spend so much time with them, and you put a lot of effort in making sure that they're successful in the use of your product.
Right.
Right. So that takes time too, right? It's not only getting them they bought it, but now they need to be successful, because if they're not, guess what? They're not doing a case study for you.
That's right. And it all falls apart.
They're not doing a testimonial
right.
and all these kinds of things. So,
but it's everything. And you skip that step and you could be raising money. You could be wasting another 5 years of your life. You could be doing everything for a product that no one wants.
Yeah.
Even though you're driving hard at it. So it's just a key piece.
That's pretty cool. That's really cool. You had, I mean, man, this is one of these things where there's so many places I want to take this. Like there's all the things that preceded that, but let's kind of continue down this journey a little bit with Lead Method, this company.
Yeah.
And maybe if we can relate it back to that article, because there's some points in that article that I think were pretty poignant that I took away that wasn't just getting the customer, but how you thought about growing your business and exiting and how that happens earlier. The planning for that happens earlier than you think, but table that for a minute. Okay, you now have customer validation and you're thinking, go to market. I don't know. Part of me is like, why raise any money? Why did you feel like you needed to raise money at that point? And if you had to do it again, I mean, again, you're out of position financially where you don't want to risk probably everything, but would you raise the money? Would you raise as much? I mean, it's so hard to crystal ball these things. You think you need more. You think you need more than you probably do. Sometimes you need more than you anticipated.
Right.
So it's not a really fair question, but there's always that decision comes when you decide to raise money. So what prompted you? You've got customer traction to say, hey, I'm going to raise money now.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And it depends on the business you're in. At the time, the first raise was 2015. And I was drinking a little bit of the Kool-Aid, honestly. Everyone was raising. It wasn't that difficult to raise.
Too,
and you thought, this is just what I'm supposed to do. And then you get some people, advisors chirping at you.
Yeah.
Right? And before you know it, all you're doing is putting an investor deck together and doing the roadshow. I'm like, wait a minute, I've got a business to run, especially when you're small.
Yeah.
We had 5 people when I raised that first round. So it's hard to say in a SaaS business because fundamentally it really is, to truly scale, you've got to get salespeople. I mean, most enterprise SaaS products aren't bought. They have to be sold. So you've got to get that marketing and sales muscle to really push it, because enterprises aren't necessarily looking for the solution to this problem.
Yeah.
You've got to put it in front of them, which takes lots of money and, all sorts of things.
Said another way, you're creating the demand.
You're creating the demand,
yeah,
especially in a new market.
Maybe not an ask for the supply, but you're creating demand. You're basically creating a product category, if you will, that they now understand will make them benefit in one of two ways: more revenue or some more efficiencies in their business or whatever it is. So
and you probably did that at Mazama as well, right? I mean, it was similar.
Yeah, I think
situation.
Absolutely. We said, hey, you have this pain point you almost don't even know about.
Right.
And ours was more revenue, trying to we talked about this the other week. Like, is it a pain point? Like, gosh, like Chris's business was a pain point, right? It was Y2K.
Yeah, you needed it.
And then it was like Sarbanes-Oxley, right? So big legislation, regulation, you have to make these changes.
Yep.
Either do it with us or somebody else. We're going to be better. I didn't have really that scenario. I had more, hey, if you organize your data this way and you get to this information more quickly and you do that across your enterprise, you're going to get more business. And we could prove that, right? We ended up proving that because they find the data, then they take it to their customer, and then they look like they were, more knowledgeable about a space or whatever.
Sure.
So not to get into our thing too much, but it was the revenue side. Was yours the revenue side and the efficiency, or what was
it? Was both. It really was.
It was strongly both.
Yeah. I mean, I've really never created a business that hasn't been tied to the revenue side, because it's such an anchor. Like, it's hard to say no to a proven revenue increase.
Yeah.
Save time, operations, whatever.
Yeah.
Improve a process. That's just not, it's harder to sell. That's the reality.
Yeah.
So if you say, look, if you do this and do this right, you're going to generate 20% increase in revenue. And here's 10 companies in your category that have done the same thing. That's a difficult thing to say no to.
I don't know what you did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. What problem were you solving?
I don't really know either.
Oh my gosh.
But I do. I have better insight. But honestly, Eric, I almost think in some ways for me it doesn't matter. It's like, how are you executing on this product?
Mm-hmm.
But tell us what you did.
Sure.
Because it's good to know.
But you're coming out of this other company and,
right.
and you've identified a problem. I just don't know what that problem was.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, this is a really good story on your first product isn't always the product that scales. Yeah. So my first business was called Pump Scout, and it was a CPQ, configuration, pricing, quotation, meets lead gen for industrial equipment companies, engineered products, pumps, valves, compressors, all these different things. Because that's early in my career, I'd worked for a company that automated the sales process around the industrial equipment space. So I built this, website called Pump Scout, and we were basically bringing in, so it was the lending tree for industrial equipment, right? How you bring in buyers, match them with complex suppliers, and then, they marry and there they go. So it was truly a lead gen product. And there was big companies doing it. We studied SEO and really dialed it in. I had 5,000 pages to this Pump Scout at a content army, and we were pulling people in and outranking these billion-dollar companies at their particular products. So engineers would come to the site, they'd spec their pump, send the request out, and they'd get a bunch of quotes from people. And that business was great. It was more of a marketplace than it was a SaaS play. But I remember the day when like a Bechtel engineer, Bechtel's a big global engineering firm, had submitted some information and they were waiting, called and said, look, I've got a credit card for a $5,000 pump right now and no one's called me. It's been 48 hours. And I said, whoa, what is this? And going back to the product market fit and, being passionate about solving problems, I was like, what is the problem here? Realized that the manufacturer that is paying me for these leads sells through distributors. And they failed to transfer that lead down to the person that was supposed to follow up with it, which is the distributor. Why they didn't send it, I don't know. It was a broken process. Or maybe they did in some cases and the distributor never followed up with that customer. So that was the core problem. So the company Lead Method that ultimately was my first exit, Pump Scout sort of blended into Lead Method. Lead Method was a channel partner management product where we monitored that lead flow, that transaction, and understood if they followed up with the lead, if they called the lead, and what was the result of the end result of that connection. So we could tell the manufacturer if they sent it, what was happening. We helped them manage their independent external outside sales team. So that was really it. No one was doing that at the time.
Well, what was cool too about that, and that you were doing it for the niche of like engineering firms.
Well, manufacturing companies.
Yes, companies, exactly. Right. And so, I mean, I'm kind of more in broad strokes, Eric. I kind of look at it as like, this is CRM for this particular space.
Yes.
But it required that integration with the distributors and everything like that. So sort of some nuanced aspects to it that made it, I think those create natural barriers for competition too.
It's huge. People don't understand the workflow or the process or relationship, and they could look at, that's why I wasn't afraid to go on stage at BBC and tell everyone what we did.
Yeah.
There's a lot of companies that can be copied in that situation, but I was like, good luck, because we understand the nuances and the players and everything else, and connected it all. And once one found out about it, the rest of them were like, wait a minute, now you have a competitive advantage. You're making more money because you're understanding this process flow and this interaction, and you're taking care of our customers. Yeah. And that's really what it came down to. So, it's a lot of fun. So it wasn't that first product. It was the second one that led us to the Lead Method. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
because I remember you talking to me about Pump Scout. Yeah. You were kind of the marketplace for that very beginning, and it sort of transitioned into Lead Method. So so that was the timing when you were raising money sort of to scale. I like the honest answer. It was just like, that's what everybody was doing. Doesn't mean it was the right thing to do, but it was what everybody's doing. The valuations are pretty good.
We were profitable. We had money in the bank.
You had money.
I mean, we needed to raise money if we wanted to hire 20 people, but I could have hired one month, the next month, or we could have done that.
Did that capital come at a cost for your ownership of the company, or did
of course, yeah.
Yeah. So what percentage did you have to give up early on? I'm just kind of
I'm
for
new
sure.
To this
stuff, guys,
no, it's great. So the first round was like $375,000, so it wasn't it was a smart move. And it was, it was a note.
Was that the Ben Venture round?
No, that was 17.
Okay.
So we did it again in 17 when things looked even better.
Gotcha.
And that was, 1.5.
So 375 was family and friends?
No, that was some local
Angels.
Yeah. Okay. And local funds, the typical Bend, Oregon funds.
Gotcha.
That were doing $50,000 to $150,000 checks, that stuff. Right.
Gotcha.
And it was really friendly. It was great. They were, they were all
the seed stage.
Those groups are around, and they wanted to promote, especially sort of Central Oregon businesses and, the technology. And they saw some success, Monzama and, others like that.
Jama and Elemental.
Exactly.
These companies had exited the BBC early. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because, or ironic in some ways, because I was actually sitting down yesterday with Brian Vieira, who heads up the kind of the fundraising for the Ben Venture Conference.
Venture Catalyst,
now. And he said, the problem with investors in the BBC, they just invest it 1 year at a time. You got to do it over a 10-year horizon. Because if you're just picking a year, you're probably going to lose. If it's somewhere back there, and I don't even put, Manzam had a nice exit for BBC, but there were some that were just crazy.
Elemental.
Right? I mean, I think Jama was the biggest one. Elemental was great too, but nothing's, few have happened since there, but smaller like ours. Really. But they're still good, but a lot of them haven't done it, haven't materialized. So he's trying to create more like, hey, this is a longer term process. So but to go back to Eric's question, not to get, I guess Eric, that what people own depends on how the company's valued, right? I mean, and what he was saying in these heady times, I mean, you could push your valuation up, and that wasn't quite heady. I mean, I think you had a reasonable valuation. The whole thing
was fine, yeah.
But
but you want to press the value of the company high,
of course.
So you get more money for less of a percentage of your company. Yeah, and that's just kind of interesting to me because I never faced that situation.
Sure.
I mean, I had bank loans.
Yeah.
And they more or less own the company.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I guess I did experience that, but just not on this venture conference or capital kind of level.
It's a good question.
It's an interesting dance, and it's all about the advisors and the people. Pete was advising me the whole time because he was 2 or 3 stages ahead, and he'd been through this, model.
And you guys were buds by this point?
Yeah. I mean, I was trying to, this
pick his brain?
for sure.
I was picking his brain too because he was doing more some online marketing, lead generation stuff that we weren't very good at Manzama, because we were really just about trying to, we had 650 potential clients around the world, right? The biggest law firms. That was sort of our market. And we were good about relationships, but then we try to take our product downstream, which, by the way, 650, I don't know if I have this exactly right, but maybe represents 20% of the lawyers, right?
Sure.
80% of the market is smaller.
Right.
But we did not know how to sell well into that market. And so we would get together and I'd say, what are you doing in this area? And he's like, hey, because he was SEO, SEM, he knew all this stuff. And so we tried some things that actually helped both businesses, our bigger business. And I get in the minutiae later, but going downstream for us, we weren't as successful just because it's sort of like, what's your path of least resistance, right? So for me, my path of least resistance was just sell more into my existing customer base. They've got the wallet share.
Right.
I already have the relationship. Well, why am I going to push on a $5,000 deal downstream where they don't know me, they're cheaper, and they don't have their wallet share? You're competing with a lot of other potential small products that they're trying to buy, if that makes sense. It's just... Boy, the worlds are so different between enterprise sales and that was more B2C stuff, but he had done some of that. And
is this part of your makeup, though, you think, Justin, to pull on shirt sleeves and ask people who have been through it a little bit and ask for advice? Is that something that you think you developed, or is it just a thing that you're just always a curious person? Or
yeah, I think it's a combination of both, for sure. And it's essential for successful entrepreneurs, in my opinion, because no one knows anything when they start. You may think you do, and you may know a category or a market, but we'll talk about this later, but I'm now on my 4th business. And what I know now, it takes me 2 weeks to do what took me 2 years at the beginning. Mm-hmm. You're just scrambling. You're figuring out, I mean, we can read about everything on the internet, but talking to somebody and just collecting from 5 or 6 different data points for people that have done real estate, people that have done software, people that have been in banking, whatever it is, assembling that and then applying it to your model is so critical. And that's why, anyone that's starting companies, like, you've got to reach out and learn from those that have been there. Look at the boneyard, right? The failures, the successes, whatever. Mm-hmm. And then take that information and do what you're going to do with it. Because that's the thing that pains me the most. Entrepreneurs, they're, they're confident, they're feisty, they're ready to get after it and take over the world, and they think they know everything. It's like, oh, now you know exactly why 80%, 90% of businesses fail, because you don't listen. People don't listen well. Yeah. They don't take the time to go find out the information and learn from others, and it's a disaster before it even starts.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Not to say I have all the answers, but
but
people and learning from people.
I like your. I mean, the question is great because we're trying to do also is identify characteristics, right? Mm-hmm. Traits of people that, regardless of industry, they exercise certain muscles more than other people do, right? And I think we were talking about this even pre-call, right? Pre-podcast, starting it up today, but showing that initiative and the curiosity,
absolutely, yeah.
And just being, I mean, whatever you want to call it, curiosity, inquisitiveness, but mm-hmm. just being proactive mm-hmm. with that stuff. Like, I think when you do that naturally, you don't see it as a trait or a skill. You just think that that's what everybody does.
That just happened to me the other day.
But it's not, unfortunately.
My gal said that I was super curious. And I never really thought of myself as super curious.
But I've always thought of you that way.
But apparently I am, according to, you too and her. And I was like, oh, geez. Because I feel like some of my curiosity is waning,
right?
And she's like, yeah, but you're still way more curious than I am. So
that's awesome.
That's the thing, pulling on the shirt sleeve and being willing to be a little naive mm-hmm. in those questions and learn what you don't know, and especially with somebody that you can trust.
Right.
And I think face to face, that's how I learn if I can trust somebody.
Absolutely.
I can't do it online. It's just not for me.
Right. And the key also with that is just be humbled, right? Yeah. It's like, we know there's people we choose to hang out with and there's people that we don't. And I try to center myself around the humble people because it's like, not everyone knows everything. Yeah. And you can learn so much from just shutting up and asking questions. It's like, and for an entrepreneur, that's so key at the beginning stages. It's customers, it's partners, it's advisors, it's everyone that you can learn from.
There's another piece to that though. And I want to understand how you navigated that piece, which is, it's great to ask for all the advice, mm-hmm. but you got to filter it at some point and understand which advice to take.
Yes.
Because I found with some success when your business starts to see, then you're going to get more people giving you input on, well, maybe you do this, maybe you do that, you should do this. And this is how these guys did. Go down here, mirror what they did in Silicon Valley or wherever it is you're looking, And so what's the muscle or the skill when you kind of filtered it down and decide, well, this is what I need to do. I know this is going to work for my endeavor. Mm-hmm. Because I feel like I got advice from some very smart people, but my best advice was not taking that advice.
Yeah, totally.
And that's a hard thing to do, but I'm kind of curious how I don't know if you've ever faced that, Eric, too, like within some of your, investments and stuff like
Absolutely. That. Absolutely. Yeah. And I just don't take it. Sometimes I'll realize that it works in a certain sector, a certain demographic or a region, but it doesn't work for where I'm at in the niche that I'm after. And I love it. I appreciate the information, but then I bank it in case I end up over in that region, but generally.
Is that something though that, okay, at let's say 40 and older, you have a better sense of what that is. 30 and under, you don't have as much experience to lean on. You haven't seen those trends. So are you just going on your intuition at that point? Like, I just feel like what this guy or gal is telling me just makes more sense for what I'm trying to do. Is that, what muscle is the most important at that stage? And I don't know if it's an age thing or if it's just,
well, I think it's important to separate the advice into two categories. There's your product market fit, the thing you're building. And there's everything else, operations, accounting, fundraising, whatever it is. Those are pretty proven models. And you go to somebody that has raised money, as for an example, multiple times. How do I do this? What do I do here?
Yeah.
That's the advice I'm talking about. Or operationally, how do I hire a sales team? Mm-hmm. What have you found that you're looking for in a salesperson, right? I remember Chris Captivella's advice for me one time was, when you're hiring sales, hire 10 and keep 2, and then hire 10 and keep 2. And it's just like, or good salespeople BS and bad ones do too. So all due respect to all the salespeople out there, but the reality is salespeople took years off my life. And we'll talk about that in a second, what you're good at and what you're not good at.
The failure rate of sales,
But so the operational accounting, finance, fundraising, like there's a model out there that people have done. And most of it's right and wrong, right?
Yeah.
But that's not something that, if you don't have experience on it, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
The product market fit is different. And that's where you struggle. You're in a board meeting and the board members start giving you advice here
on your product.
sorry, but you don't know anything about this, right? And when you do, bring me the conversations with customers, bring me the research, bring me the experience.
Yeah.
I don't care that you ran an accounting software company. You don't know this. Yeah. And not to say that you shouldn't take advice.
Yeah.
But I know my customers, and I know the market, and I know the thought leaders and the advisors. I know the people in my space that I can go talk to about how to solve that problem. If you've got advice on how to raise money, great. So you take advice from the people in the areas they're an expert in.
Yeah.
And if they know more than you about it, then that's great advice. Mm-hmm. But get 2 or 3 data points also, not just one.
Yeah.
Right? So
I like that.
It's just one of those things. It's not
absolutely
the advice of raising money, right?
Yeah.
We raised in 15 and we did it in 17 as a part of the BBC.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't have done that. Probably would have raised half.
Yeah. You mean if you were on your own, or just...
if I was on my own and I didn't have a board and I didn't have these advisors that were really taking me through this journey? Because the reality is, in a fundraising mode, if you're a seed fund, if you're whatever, that's what you want your companies to do. Yeah. The more money they raise, the more opportunities open, and the more you scale, and the more valuation you're going to get. And the whole thing.
The more risk you take too.
That too.
Right.
But is that the same decision that an entrepreneur takes?
Yeah.
I would question that the second go or the third and fourth go around, which I didn't take money, and I've been just fine.
Which I commend you on that. When it's out there and it's available to you, not like it is, and these times is a little bit more difficult. There's a skill to not taking it as well.
There is,
because just because it's there and you can raise it doesn't mean it's the right thing to do for your business. And we don't need to go too far down this path, but I can get into companies that have overraised. Now they're sitting out in the market and they're just they can't sell their company, or the shares are worth less. And it's like, why do you really need to raise that money? Back to this product thing though, I think this could be important for, I think, any entrepreneur, especially if you're taking in money and you're getting advice on your product. I don't really see a lot of value from, generally speaking, board members in that capacity. I love your analogy, even if they've done an accounting company, because there's so many things that you need to do with that product that dictate how you're going to grow. So let me give you an example. Okay. So if I was, we had raised some money, as we know, with Mazama, but I was getting this cash and like, oh yeah, you got to go horizontal, because we were vertical, right? We're in the legal industry. You got to go horizontal and exploit all these other niches. It's basically the same product, right? I'm thinking to myself, no, it's not. I've got 10 things my customers still want me to do just to try to succeed in legal. And I've got 2 pretty good competitors, and we haven't established a total leadership position in our own market. I'm going to put that at risk to go chase something in a horizontal. Well, if I had done that, like really done it full bore, like some people had wanted, I'm now losing here, trying to now recover back in my core market. And I don't know what I'm doing over here, but I've got a whole different set of competitors over here horizontally. So that product strategy doesn't make any sense in the market strategy for where the product's at today, right?
And that was advice that the guys that were lending you money were trying to...
There were some that were advising that.
Yeah, not all of them. But
not all of them.
But you knew, I'm really grateful not to listen to that. Or you listened to it, but you knew not to take that.
It's a hard position to be in.
How do you figure
really
that
hard?
out? I want to figure out how to bridge that gap. So for everybody listening, it's like,
and also I had more at risk. I had the most at risk. So for me to bring in more money, I'm more risking my, the equity outcome as a person that started someone who's 40, now 10 years later, versus someone starting, say, at 26. So I go back to like my first business where we had some advice on that. I almost wish I would have done that, like taken the 10 or 15, because I then 5 or 7 years later, I saw who became the leaders in the horizontal space.
Yeah.
And I think we were beating them and I think we would have beat them there too. Right.
Wow. Interesting.
And I could have afforded the loss if it didn't work out.
Right.
And the gain would have been maybe worth the risk profile. So you also have that going for you, right? So what's your risk profile in that scenario?
Yeah.
And maybe I was never wired that way, so I don't want to assume that I would have still done it just because it was easier then, and the capital was coming in nicely at that time too. I think part of it's a risk profile, part of it's age. This is why I kind of get annoyed with the whole venture capital model, because they'll try to get into a lot of times younger people that they feel can take those big risks, and they kind of push them into that. push them into that scenario, if you will.
If I was lending money, I think I would.
And if it works out,
go
great.
Get big. Outside your comfort zone. You're young. You've got all this energy. You go take the risk.
You got the energy at 40. I mean, I don't know. That's a philosophical thing from an investor that we would probably explore at a later date in more detail. But I wonder if you're betting more on trying to hit doubles and triples in a fund versus only hitting and they'll tell you, well, only 1 out of 10 make it. Yeah, but that's 1 out of 10 when you're swinging for the fences every time. Yeah. If you're taking a calculated double, maybe it's 4 out of 10 to make it.
Sure.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm no fund manager, so I'm not going to pretend I know this stuff. But when I watch how they've performed, and I've invested in some, and I think you have too, I'm like, this is marginal performance from people apparently, have more expertise than I do. Right. Let's put it that way.
And I also look at the S&P and how that's done in the last 10 years. Anyway, all due respect,
that makes us feel good about putting our chips into something that's super risky. Can I just put it in the S&P? Yeah. That's sad. I don't want to think about that.
No, you can't.
I want to talk about being an entrepreneur, man.
No, I know. Everyone has to, there's a part of your portfolio that should be high risk, right? That's the reality. Not everything, but part of it.
Smart enough to be a good hedge fund guy. Maybe that would be easier, right? Manage other people's money and Anyway, I don't know where we were on that point, but you take the money, you're growing. You take some money, you decide not to take some later. You're growing, and obviously you had a good outcome with your business. Yep. Tell me though, along that way, what was your biggest? Would you say was your biggest failure, or your biggest setback, or your biggest challenge? And you had, so this is a time horizon, like how many years, like between starting and exit?
Like 7 years.
7 years. So that's pretty quick. It's right in the range. Like 7 to 10 is kind of where you're thinking. Like some people get lucky and do it before then, but
portfolio or the seed companies are looking like that 5 to 7 range. Yeah.
Would you grapple with the most in that? Because you got product fit, you got customer transaction or traction. You've raised some money at probably pretty good valuation because you got. It's a nice time for that. So you got a good read on the capital markets. Man, everybody that's done this has been stressed at some point. I remember meeting with you, and I could sometimes see some stress, and we were trying to work through issues. And I wish people talked about those things more, because you got to understand what those look like too, right?
That's almost as important as anything. That's a great question.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Yeah. So what would you say, like going back on that? And then I want to kind of hear what your biggest one was too, because I don't think you and I talked about during your success and growth. But
yeah, I mean, you touched on a number of things with that question. I think just from the mental space, the mental health of founders, I want to just touch on that for a second before I, talk about the biggest failure and hard time. But like, this is a journey for friends, family, for everyone, right? And you really have to, when you start this thing, you got to make that plan, because nothing's ever going to go well. Things go right, but there's a reason that this happens, and this is bad. This is rough on everyone. The valley is rough on, spouse, kids, friends, everything. The peaks, sure, you're celebrating and you're doing your thing, but nothing's ever, at least businesses that I've known, it's always this.
Yeah.
And to have, recognize when you start these things, is your partner, is your spouse, do they have that risk tolerance, right? Is there a support there? I'll use an example. I mean, Kelly came from an entrepreneur family, right? Her family was a contractor. So things were great and things were down. Things were up, and
God, we have the same parallel. You know that because Casey's dad was a contractor, commercial up and down, and she knew entrepreneurism probably better than I experienced as a kid.
And they could handle it. They knew.
Yeah.
But whether they knew exactly what they were getting into, still.
His wife had this idea I remember talking about for a blog that was I'm married. I wake up next to an entrepreneur or something like that. Yeah. Entrepreneur. Who's this entrepreneur in my bed? It was that was like, and she wanted a blog about like, who's this freaking guy? I wake up with?
Yesterday was good, and today he's a hot mess.
Or he wakes up in the middle of the night.
Oh yeah,
like
I can hear him typing at 4 a.m. out there because he's got some, it's just the reality, and it's hard.
Yeah,
it's hard on everyone, and I owe everything to Kelly for this journey, because she supported me in every step of the way, but that's part of it. When you leave your job, do you have customers? when you leave your job, is your partner working to keep food coming through, right?
Yeah.
That you can sustain longer, because it's always longer than you think.
Yeah.
It's just that puzzle. You got to put it together and you got to see it, because you're the main breadwinner there and there's no money coming in. Like, that's, most businesses fail because they didn't have enough time, money, right? I mean, really, the product market fit, we talk about that, but when you're out of money, you've got to go back and get your day job. And business isn't Bend. It doesn't mean you get a day job in Bend. You go back to Seattle, you go back to San Francisco, you go back to Portland. So that's a uprooted life change right there. So you really got to get it dialed.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was, and then.
So that's more kind of the macro environment.
Yes.
You're saying that's a challenge in itself. The 10 years you're doing it.
Yeah.
In your case, 7, it could be 10, it could be 15 is the mental game and how you.
Yeah.
And
it's just staying strong.
And we talked about this a little bit. I feel like we talked about this with Chris, just to relate to this point. Like when I was asking you, like, are entrepreneurs less happy or more happy than non-entrepreneurs? Like it was sort of a real general thing.
Yeah.
And generally speaking, they are happier, but they're also more prone to be depressed, like have experience of depression, because their lows can be pretty low, right? It's financial strain. It's then becomes marriage strain.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So again, for anybody, kind of the eyes wide open thing, like, yeah, you get the passion, you get the energy, you love getting up, eat what you kill kind of thing. And that gives you energy. But then there's all those other downsides that are sort of, if you have a good corporate job, you may not be exposed to as much. I mean, there's layoffs in that world too.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to, diminish that sort of experience. But okay, so I think that overall macro kind of feeling to it, I get that. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So you're working through that. You got your support system, but then what would you say is your?
Yeah. So we talk about, what you find out what you're good at, right? And I talked about that product market fit at the beginning, and then we talk about this journey now, and the business starts growing, and you've got client success team, and you've got sales team, you got a big dev team, and I chose to be the only, executive operator. I had team leads in these different groups, but the board fell on me alone. The P&L, the everything, hiring, everything fell on me. And as we started to get into the 30, 40 people,
I remember
that got a little heavy. And that's, where I was, calling you daily, like, Pete, help me out here.
Yeah.
But that part, I love people and I love motivating people, but there's just the people aspect of it was so hard.
Yeah.
And it's, sales teams, for example, I mean, I mentioned earlier, I love them all, but they took years off my life. You get your first BDR team in the room, and there's 7, 8 of them in there, and you walk in there and they're throwing a football around. Like, what's happening here? And then they're asking for Friday's half day, and you're looking around and this dev team that's doing 12-hour days and client success. And it's just like, it all comes together because no one has as much into it or cares as much as a founder. You cannot ask your people to go to that level. So when you see things like that, you're just heartbroken. So this, my next company, I didn't have any employees, just contractors, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't raise any money.
Yeah.
And I was doing what I love, which is building product and getting product market fit. And I could have taken it here, but I stopped right there after 18 months and I sold it. I feel great about it.
This is just recently he did this. This isn't, and
your 4th business.
Yeah.
And this is
so 3rd business. I'm on my 4th.
You're on your 4th now.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're kind of segueing a little bit into
one
thing I like. No, this is why I want to jump around.
Okay.
Like what I like about this, and I want to come back to one of the challenge things, but what I like about this is that this goes back to what I was saying. It was also in the article, and why I want to start with this article, because one of his main sort of, I guess, takeaways from that was this diversification, like do a bunch of different things at once. And that's why I call him like a mini Elon Musk. Like, I'm like, dude, you already got another idea and you're already putting capital in that thing. Like, give yourself a freaking little break over here. He's like, yeah, but Pete, that's what I did. It's way more efficient because he's that's your superpower. He's like a product guy and he sees the niches. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And I think I like to push back on that. On some level, because I have a different temperament for that. I try to do that. I've seen entrepreneurs do that, and he's very good at it. So you do have to know yourself. Can you do like 2 or 3? Because he's already got it. He sold this one. Now you got another one. You're already starting.
Yep.
And I want to talk about the one that you. I want to talk about the one you just sold.
18 months, and you sold. That's fast.
And a good ROI on it, but that we don't need to get it. I just need to share that. But what I'm saying is like you did a great job, and I'm like. And I one time I kind of teamed up with this entrepreneur guy out of Silicon Valley. He was the same way. He had like 3 or 4 things going, and he was I was learning, wow, maybe I could do this. So I tried to get 3 or 4 things going, and I about fucking kill myself.
Yeah.
Pardon my French. And so then I unwound those 2 or 3 things when I started Manzana, because I was on 2 boards.
Wow. Both
startups, I invested in both. I was thinking, did I invest in that first one? I was kind of in a leadership when I was on a board, but I had a role. Then I had my normal job that's I haven't left yet to kind of feed the company. And then I have Manzana, that's my idea. And finally I was just like, man, I pushed it all aside. Yeah. But you kind of been able to do those 2, 3 things, but you're still focused on lead method. That was 90%
I was all in.
But then you generate an idea.
I just wrote them down.
Yeah.
And granted, this is all in the same market. Like, I don't call myself an innovator. I think
your niche.
Innovation is dangerous. I'm not an Elon Musk from that capacity.
No, that's why I call you the mini Elon Musk.
Right. Well,
it has nothing to do with your stature.
Totally.
I mean,
but his brain goes to these like, big moments, blue sky things, and it's like I'm going everything.
Yeah. He's got big money too.
Well, he does, but what I like and how I de-risk is I like a market, and I understand that market. It's part of my fit, and I can sort of I can make a list of the things that I want to do there. But I've also got my stable of people I can go back to, right? That have trusted me over the years, and I built great products for them, and they've been really successful. So I go back to, once I sell the next company, I go say, hey, what do you think about this? I heard you say about this problem. And this isn't a solve all problems. These are pretty nichey, boom. And they plug into other enterprise software, and it solves a core problem for them.
Were you financially free after your first sale?
Yeah.
So what are you doing here? Like, what are you after?
I love that question. I took about a year off, and you can only mountain bike and ski. I did 65 days, Nordic skiing that year. And you realize who you are. You can only read so many books, right?
Yeah.
And
you got bored.
Yeah. And I don't grind now because I don't have to get the same amount of work done that I did at that first business.
Right.
Like little Pete, 3 hours a day, 3-4 hours a day. I take my long rides. I make sure my kids are in high school. I make sure I'm there. Make sure I thank my wife every day for all that amazing, support she gave me. And she's writing a novel. So it's, you find your way through it while still doing what you love. And I love getting up at 5 a.m. and I love grinding, but it's what makes you who you are, right? I'm not a workaholic by any means, but it's the creative part of it.
You're not now, but you probably were before.
Oh, you have to.
Because meeting with you, I don't know, 3-4 weeks ago, and when we talk about your business that you had the exit on, I mean, I was like, man, you just look like this person that's kind of has the work-life balance and the enjoyment.
You have the energy.
And not to say we don't have our tough days and this and that, and you're using your creative ability. I love that question, Eric. And, he somehow can do without having to immerse himself. And that's,
but I'm thinking about it all day.
That's where I fall. That's where I fall down a little bit. Yeah. I can't put even my toe in.
Sure.
Well,
because I feel like I'm sucked in then.
Right. Right.
I think that's partly why we're here right now, Pete, you and I, and making this thing happen is that we're not as challenged as we used to be.
Yeah.
And we're trying to figure out another way to, give back, but also kind of keep the brain spinning, without getting too soft mentally, because if you, too many
That's
days.
Exactly it. There was something missing in my head. And I was like, you know what? I love this. This is and it's not going out and making a ton of money. It's about building a product market fit, solving the problem, talking to the customer, selling some products, and then, hey, who wants to take this to the next level? Great. Here you go. Right?
Yeah,
but I don't want to do that. I want to hire that sales team that's going to be throwing
you remove the friction. Yes. That was your big point of friction in your previous business. Sorry, you're about to ask him something there.
Oh, no, I was just thinking when you were working before you even started your first company.
Yeah.
I was kind of picking up on the idea that you weren't really starting a business for the money. Mm-hmm. It was, you didn't want a boss. You wanted some freedom of schedule.
Yeah.
And the money was second or third on the list.
Yeah.
And
it would come if I was good at this. And if I wasn't, I'd go back to the job. Right.
Yeah.
But you can't. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
And a lot of us move to Bend too.
That's pretty unique, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it isn't with entrepreneurs. You guys help me out with that. I mean, how many other entrepreneurs that take off on something like that money isn't the primary driver?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, or at least hand in hand with freedom of schedule, not having a boss.
Honestly, I think he articulated exactly how I would, which is like, the money is going to come if you just do a good job at this, because you kind of understand your industry, you understand the segment, how much there is, and then potentially what you might get valued at if you build something in that segment, but you're not really focused on it because in my mind, it's so far away. If I don't solve this thing in front of me, like give me to use a product and pay me what's a reasonable amount for that product, because there's some good products out there that get built, but where people miscalculate is they're not going to pay that as much as you think they are.
Right.
So you got to get that right too.
Beginning.
And I've advised some companies on that. And I'm like, well, this guy's not going to pay. They're not going to pay you $10,000 if they barely have a budget to, for an office management system that they need to do everything, and they pay $5 for that. Why would they pay $10 for your thing? So they miss things like that too. But once those things work, you're like, oh, this is going to be worth something. But Eric, I'm 100% with you. Like, I don't let that factor into, and I don't believe a lot of successful entrepreneurs will really focus on that too early, but some do. And, they get the big, road, the eyes get real big. Well, this is going to be so big, and I got to raise more, and then I'm going to be worth $100 million. And man, if that happens to you, good for you.
Right.
But I'd say go down the road and solve a problem. And if it leads you to solve that, that's a bigger problem. Great. It's more, but I think it's just the wrong way to go. And I don't see many that successful ones think like that. And hopefully you can kind of pick up on that with someone if you're looking to invest in them. Like, what are they really in it for?
Because you're just always going to be disappointed. That number that somebody sets out, if they're truly into just purely making money, they don't care what it is.
Yeah.
Will you ever get there? I don't.
Psychologically, no. According to this survey I heard the other day, it was millionaires and billionaires, and they were asked, when are you going to have enough money? And they both said, when about double what I have now.
And then it's going to double. It's going to double.
It's unachievable. It's just the space out there that it doesn't exist. That you're chasing. So I'm more interested in the problem solving or keeping your mind sharp or other motivations, because I feel like I'm kind of up against that, as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you remove the friction of the thing that you didn't enjoy, which I kind of wanted to go back to on some level, because it was a place where you can call it a failure, you can call it a setback, but if he's learning it for the first time, hiring sales, performance team, organizations, and seeing that the success rate is really pretty low, that was really frustrating for him, right? Because that was his first time really experiencing that. And you have this thing like, wait, my product's working everywhere, and people are buying it. Like, why aren't you guys selling it?
Right.
And it's so hard to understand why that success rate is so low. Like, I think Chris's advice is really aggressive. Hire 10, keep 2. I was always like, if I could get 50%, that's how I looked at it. Then I'm doing something right. And no one is ever going to sell as good as the founder. There's people that will bring a lot of relationships to your company, and they're worth hiring, but you still may be involved in that sales process. And I don't. Maybe it's this is all I want to work, and I want to be golfing temperament. Yeah. But that I could see where that would have been a challenge and a setback, because you're putting money towards that.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
So the advice there is just kind of, understand the right ratios when you go and start to do the scale thing. And that's probably why companies have to raise more too, because that's money gone. That's $100,000 gone. You paid that guy that year. Right. That produced nothing, and with benefits and everything else on top of it.
But that's also
so you got 5 guys like that. That's $500,000.
Right. Goes quick.
You know what I mean?
So you got to sell more of your company.
That's right.
That.
So that's why you're kind of in the fundraising. We were very slow to hire, and I picked my spots pretty good. But I ended up probably still having a 50-60% success rate.
Yeah.
But there's no journey that doesn't have setbacks, though.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Has any of your companies failed? You've done 4, so you're 100%. Boy,
you lucky bastard.
Yeah.
It seems kind of rare.
I honestly think it just comes down to taking the time to vet your idea and make sure there's that, pool of customers that will buy it, that look like everything else. I get 10 of them, but I know there's 10,000 of them out there that are that same profile. So if it works for them, right? And you gotta talk to people that'll give you the truth, not friends and family that'll say, you're the best, you just keep going, right? The people that'll say, no, that sucks, go redo it. Because otherwise you just don't learn, right? We have a lot of friends And those people can tell us all sorts of things, but it's the people that are really honest with that product market fit, or, yeah, no way I'd pay you $10,000 for that thing. This thing's worth $2 to me. Great. Good input.
Yeah.
I do like people who are a little bit on the blunt side.
Absolutely.
And it might even be a bit harsh. Like Jeff Meggy, who was on the podcast before, he came at me, pretty harsh, and I was like, hey, but this guy, he doesn't pull any punches. So,
right.
So there, if things are positive and he says something, I'm going to trust that a little bit more. And I was just, put that into the trust bank and
those people
kind of work from there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So just broaden your network and make sure you've got people that'll be there, and continue to remind them, do not tell me what you think I want to hear. Tell me what truly you believe that this market's going to respond to.
Yeah.
So, and I haven't made huge bets. They've been measured, calculated products that are here, right? And
this goes back to the other thing that I was talking about before in the pattern recognition is the domain expertise and sticking in your domain. You've invested a lot of time in that domain, understanding sort of the nuances of it, where the next fit's going to be.
Right.
Become a sharpshooter within that niche.
Become a sharpshooter. That probability of success goes way up.
Huge.
I mean, kudos to you for not having those failures. I mean, I took some time to try to do things outside of my industry, thinking, oh, well, I'm just sort of tired of this. Let's see what corporate America's got. Not with the same risk profile, but just running a startup. And I really didn't do that well. I had the same temperament, but I had no relationships. Yeah. I didn't understand sort of the urgency of the buyer the same way, or the way that they wanted to be sold to was different. Okay, so the way that I might sell to a professional service market, i.e. lawyers or financial services, is a lot different than how I would sell to a restaurant owner.
Right. Yeah.
Right. One's not right or wrong, but I'm now having to kind of, change the way I go about articulate everything. Right. And it was. I'm not saying don't do it if you got a great idea. I think in the pattern recognition, sticking to your domain is easier. And kind of when I watch your journey.
Yeah.
And where you've rolled back to, like, you guys are kind of similar in that way. Like, you're like, I want less people. I don't love the management side. I like leading and encouraging and doing that. But that's where you removed a thing from your experience, even though you both probably are really good leaders and managers. If you want to be, you just don't want to deal with it.
Right.
And I kind of get that, right? Because I've gotten there too later in my life, but there's really no but there, because people was the biggest challenge along the way.
Huge.
Having to let a key employee go that's been with you for 5 years,
and you just care.
Like that.
I mean, care
those
about
are
people.
Those are things that happen, right? And
Pete, what was your superpower?
I was just about to go in my super failure, but but I'll go in, because I don't like on the outside how Manzama is viewed as I mean, it's fine as viewed as a success, but I think people kind of assume there weren't a lot of bumps on the way because we just kept growing. But we had some, we had to have layoffs at one point, and that Christmas party that year wasn't great. And we did a lot. Case reminded me this the other night. We did a lot less at that Christmas party. I mean, the gifts, everything, and there's just sort of like, I wasn't willing to spend up on our Christmas party when we just let 4 or 5 people go, which wasn't, I mean, a ton in the scheme of things, but to me, it hurts. Yeah, it was a loss, right? And then the energy that was happening. Having said that, that setback also made people appreciate the job that they had.
Oh yeah,
and that fact that they were, and there was some, I mean, even with a company that's pretty small, there's probably some fat on the bone, where things are getting easier.
Yeah.
But man, that was rough. So superpower wise, more the positive stuff. But regardless of whatever your journey is, you're gonna have to experience that. We've all had that, right?
Sure.
So I'll go to mine to some extent, and then you can jump to yours, because I was thinking about this the other day, and I would say, like, for me, it was always, I felt like I could get people to join the company that I needed, that would have other offers, or because they were talented or whatever. And the reason why that became something I was able to do early on, I would say it's something I did more off just my own kind of example of how I worked and conviction around the product or whatever, and company later on became more, I would say something that was more methodical, right? It was like the way I could tell the story about the business, the market opportunity, appeal to their reasoning side, not just, and then also appeal to whatever the intellectual challenge that they needed to have, right? So let me give you an example. This guy that I got that came on that was our data scientist, and this is now we're 6-7 years in. He was at a company in Oregon that now we've come to realize is basically one of the most successful startups ever in Oregon. It was Jama Software.
wow.
He was their director of data science.
Wow.
So he's at this company that, frankly, was growing way faster than we were, bigger. I think their ROI, their return on their investment through the BBC investment was 10x what Manzama return, and we had a good return, but they had and he had some stocks in that, and he was there and he was solving some problems, but I got him to leave that company and join our company, not by paying him more money, because I think we paid him about the same, maybe even a little less, probably had more equity, but he could see what he was going to be able to do, right? So that was my superpower. Because I knew at that point in my career that what's going to make this succeed is if I get the right person, this inflection point, or this inflection point. If I don't get the right person, regardless of my ability to tell a story or however you want to look at it to a customer or investor, it wasn't going to work.
Interesting.
Right. And so I'm glad he came and did some things, and that's sort of one example. And there are other examples early on with salespeople and stuff like that. But I would say out of all the things, that would probably be the superpower. And I hate talking about myself in that context. Like, hey, here, this is what but that was, if I had to look back on it, which is why Eric and Justin, I got into the sort of the leadership development side of things, because for me, it was training people how to build good cultures, to attract talent. Because that's why you build a good culture. You can attract and retain talent.
Right.
Because otherwise it's a soft principle. Like, oh, I got a good culture. We have beers on Friday. What does that mean even? Like, what is, so we can digress on that all day.
No, but I would agree. Like, you're the best leader that I've seen in a lot of capacities, especially for that, 50 to 100 employee company. I mean, I've seen you at the
because
big
I don't
one,
like that.
But
I don't want that.
I've seen you in action so many times, and it's like, you can just see how your people believe in you. And, they know you hired the best people for those roles at the right time. And you built this team and assembled it with Mark. Yeah. And now you're going. And it's like, it's infectious. It really is. To see a leader stand up and do what they do every day, to have that commitment level, that was very obvious to me the first time I met you. So
I appreciate that.
I would agree with that for sure.
Pretty exhausting too, at the end of the day. Another thing they sort of keep, like to your point, running your companies now, which I want to talk about more, but Eric, what's your superpower?
Oh, I imagine niche identification plays a role in there, and
huge.
That's and to kind of pare that down a little bit further. West Side Properties had little piece of shit houses on them from the mill era, and nothing I did was over 1,600 square feet, so it was that and smaller.
Wow.
Mostly around 800, right? Yeah. And so basically, I could distill the value of the land.
Wow.
Because the house almost had no value or even a negative value.
Yeah.
And so I would track, and I was obsessed with if a lot would sell in the downtown Bend area, I'd be like, oh, I got a real number there without a structure at all. No STC improvements or none of, water, sewer, nothing.
Sweet.
Okay, bare dirt. Cool. So I was just a bare dirt assessor. And I think that was probably what I was best at.
That's great.
And then I could put the structure back on and do the math from there.
Yeah.
And generally I'd buy stuff for the value of the dirt with the structure and then bring the house back for very little.
That's awesome.
And that was the construction stuff, but that was
everything.
That was
but you were also, your timing was good and stuff, like you were willing to invest in several at once when the market was bad, when other people weren't doing it, and on the courthouse steps.
I couldn't believe all the people that came off the sidelines in 2014 and started buying houses cash, and I'm like, you had that cash during all this time and you weren't buying anything because you were scared because nobody else is doing it.
Sure.
And I'm like, man, if I had every gun in the arsenals out there, hit everything I could, and money was tight at the time.
But you're also super passionate about it. You can tell from your voice. I mean, that's a huge part of it. If you're not passionate about it, then you're not going to do it well. You're not going to spend the time waking up at 5 a.m. to make sure, check the properties. Hey, where am I at? Right? Which is awesome.
Yeah, I do love it.
Yeah.
I still do. Not a single house that I rebuilt has been torn down yet.
Wow.
And most of them are around 800 square feet.
Amazing.
So, which is hard to say around the west side of Bend.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I mean, it will happen. It's coming. I know it is. So it's not like that's a definitive, but I'm real proud of that.
That's great. Heck yeah, man! Congratulations. It's awesome.
you kind of zigged when when you zag, kind of a thing, same as buying when the market's crap. I mean, you have to, timing is, regardless of what people say, this goes to, I want to talk one more thing about you, and we're bumping up against our time, and I want to be cognizant, but one of the things I would say with you, I'm curious about is, again, I took away from the article, which is counter to a lot of advice, which is, I wrote it down here. It says, you're always working on the exit. And I think there's a belief, and I would call it a fallacy, essentially, that you're going to build some company and someone's just 3 or 4 buyers just going to become knocking on your door.
Right.
Especially in a niche thing. They don't necessarily know who you are. They don't know if you're out there. You may fit into a larger strategic plan of some company that's now going to go into your niche or legal or whatever.
Yep.
That's doing roll-ups. I mean, there's so many potential, frankly, buyers of any good company that was that an aspect of the article, when we go back to that as a motivator, that you sort of took forward, and tell me how you applied that and when you started rationalizing this is the time to exit.
Yeah, it's a good, I mean, he's right. You always have to be thinking about the exit, especially when you take money, because investors are that's what they do. They're not looking to fund a lifestyle business, most of them.
Yeah.
They want an exit between 5 and 7 years typically. Now it's more of 7-10 years. Yeah. But, I kept a list of all the buyers in all 7 years, and I had 150 of them at the end. So when it came time to hire our M&A firm, right, our advisors, and they're going to market, I had a list ready for the Lead Method product. And
okay, so tell me about this. Okay,
yeah.
You had this list ready. I get that, but what was it that drove your decision to sell at that time? Because here's another thing that I think is the fallacy, is the one liner in this. You don't get sold, you get bought. I think is what people would say. Meaning that you don't really put yourself out there, because then you look like you're trying to sell the company, and they're like, well, what's wrong with it? And then they're going to drive your value down. It's kind of like, I mean, I guess the analogy I'd say, it's like, the girl you're asking to the dance, you don't, you want to play it cool for a bit. You don't go up and ask her right away and just smother with flowers. She'd be like, who is this freaking guy?
So I've been doing it wrong this whole time, is what you're saying. Thanks. Now you tell me.
No, you did it right. I know, Janelle. You did exactly right. So you did great there. But this is where I think this is some counter advice to that. And it doesn't mean that, you're doing that, you're running, but you have these companies, something in the market is giving you some indicators. I know timing investors, but what's going through your head to say, I got to get out. I think this is the time to get out, because this is important for entrepreneurs to understand when this happens. And how did I build these relationships to get to that point where I can get out and make it competitive? Because you did all those things.
Sure.
That's hard to do.
It is. I mean, you need a meaningful business, and you need to show maybe not the hockey stick of growth, but consistent growth, and you need a good story, and you need revenue, obviously. And then you still need to show the opportunity for what an acquirer looks at. So for us in Lead Method, we had a serious buyer come in at year 5, another one at year 6 that we just didn't put the numbers together. So without that, I might not have been, and the board might not have been thinking that far forward.
Okay.
And then we looked at it and said, okay, well, investors are looking for a return in this zone. We're now in this zone. We've got a good story. We've got a good opportunity. Where's Justin at? Justin's, he's doing fine. It's not like the first 2 years, right? And I was honest with my board about that. Look, this is where I thrive.
Yeah.
This is maybe a place that we've already had some lean-ins.
Extract the most value.
Right. And now, hey, let's run a process. So I had, 3 actually that were when we brought it to the table, they were in, and then we could say, oh, okay, you got bird in hand. Now we can take it here versus totally cold. That's hard, like you said.
You did have one sort of leading the charge a little bit.
Yes, exactly. And then, so we took it and shopped it, and then came to a conclusion that was a great fit.
Time to get it done.
And the valuations of 2021 were massive.
Well, that's what
highest in history, insane. And that was another one, right? People were being sold for incredible multiples.
And you're keeping track of it. You see the macro data, that's happening.
Yep.
Right.
And we can't lose out on this. It could go up more, but it's just one of those things.
Yeah.
And then
That's kind of drove me too. And I feel like you do need to be, it's just like if you're investing in a property, it's down low and you kind of get a sense of this is topping out through the metrics of appreciation, historical standards, right? By historical standards, this doesn't make sense that for like a P is paying 5 to 10x as opposed to when they historically paid 2 to 4. Well, eventually it's going to come back to the averages of what they paid, unless they fully change their financial model.
Yep.
And that's been hard to do, especially with now that interest rates are up, so now they're kind of more back to historicals. I would venture to guess. I haven't really looked at the data, but just by virtue of the amount of transactions that are happening being way down, it's kind of telling you what you need to know.
I agree.
So, you had the interest, you generated the buyers. Yeah. No, I think because, for me, when I was seeing those indicators and it was 19 that we sold, I was like, and we had some interest, but we didn't have like there was one kind of that always been kicking around. I'm like, these guys are never going to do anything. We've sent them our stuff. They put a, shitty offer in front of us, that. I'm like, well, let's just see what, and this goes back to, I was fortunate to have a really great team. And this is why I always say the entrepreneur jury is not just the entrepreneur, it's the team. They're entrepreneurs too. They're just not taking the same risk as you are.
Yeah.
But they're taking a risk and they're still entrepreneurs. So I love those guys. And I was able to just do that for 6 months. Like I didn't do anything else except talk to strategics, PE firms, and they were trying to roll us. Some were trying to roll us up into this and that. But it was really on some level counter to the idea of like the bought sold thing I'd used before. Yeah. It was pretty deliberate, but not also being the guy who ran up with 2 bouquets, the first one, because they're gonna figure all that out. Yeah, they're gonna try to drive. If they can get 3.8x multiple versus a 4.2x multiple, they're gonna know that.
Yep.
And so competitive dynamic, you had all of it going. You had multiple offers, everything like that. So anyway, I wanted to go back to that because I felt like when I was talking to you during that time of your life, you were pretty deliberate about it and understood. Look, you just said 2021 highest value. There you go.
Right.
And we know some other people like that too. So congratulations on, that piece. And I didn't realize you never had a freaking failure in one of your businesses. I'm envious over here, man. Pioneers get arrows in their backs, right? I got a few of those. You son of a.
What a beautiful analogy. I'll never not see
that. Well, that's why I let the pioneers run up and I kind of try to slide in right behind them. Let a couple bodies fall.
Once the quivers are empty, then you can take a risk or two.
Yeah.
So you're working on your next ones.
Yep.
You just had this other one exit, and that's been a lot of fun with you. I want to hear about those stories too.
Sure.
I think we've covered a lot today.
Yeah.
The one thing I was thinking about ending on a little bit with you is that we didn't talk. I don't know if you know this about Justin. He loves music. He took another risk at one point.
Okay.
He went out to, where was that on? You went on Wall Street and you played your guitar and you sang.
Downtown, yeah.
And you posted that thing on LinkedIn. And I remember going, that's so awesome. And you did that. And so there's something in your profile, like you don't mind putting yourself out there.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to.
And you can deal with like, hey, if I'm a fail, I failed publicly, but at least I did this thing,
Exactly.
So, man, I want to see you play some more music down the road.
The key is that I don't let anyone know where I am or when I'm there. It's just, I think it was the 4th time I did it. I got heckled by a bunch of high school kids, and I was like, okay, it's time to hang it up.
Maybe I'm done.
Yeah, exactly. It was funny.
Send me some of your recorded tunes. And I'll put it on to wrap the pod when we do that.
It's pretty funny.
So, I do have one other question.
Yeah,
I got to throw out. It just kind of jumped in my head. But like when you sold your first company and you're out of the game financially,
sure.
What did you buy? What did you do? It was like in celebration.
It's really funny. That's a great question. I bought a 1986 Volkswagen Westfalia camper, and my family will continually laugh about me during this time, but I put some big rims and tires on it in this like retro. I called it Steely, like Steely Dan, but it was Steely Van. And that was the license plate. And this retro 80s stripe across it. And this thing was just awesome. I mean, it's a piece of junk. Don't get me wrong. Those things are, you know.
Yeah.
I made a rule.
Having problems.
Don't go more than 25 miles away from the house. I think I camped in it one time. Yeah. But every day I'd wake up and I'd get in that thing and I'd just pump the music and I'd drive around downtown. And it was so fun. Just, you know, windows rolled down and people were like, nice ride, man.
Yeah.
You know, don't ask me to work on it, but it looks good.
Yeah, that's cool, man.
Buddy of mine told me something about the, you know, the Volkswagens. He goes, 2 things you need when you drive around one of those old ones is a credit card and a sense of humor. And maybe a fire extinguisher.
Totally. And I sold that thing 8 months later. So that was it.
Yeah.
Really? Only 8 months?
That was it. Yep.
Yeah, because the money sometimes
it's just not practical at all.
Right. Yeah.
Those is fun.
Impractical things are fun to kind of dabble in, but then I've got a similar experience right now too, and I don't really care about it. You know, it's just the old Bronco.
Right.
You know, and
totally.
I liked it for a while, but it became a money trap, and it's just like I'm kind of over it. I'd rather buy surfboards or you know upgrade my raft or something like that. But it's the little things that ends up not being like this money thing. Where you think, oh yeah, you're gonna go buy that, you know. I don't know, Ferrari that you saw.
Sentimental value, and I had my guitar in the back, and that's all that mattered.
Keeping it simple, man.
Yeah, trying.
Hey, listen, man, I appreciate being with us today.
Thank you, guys.
Let's do it another time down the road when you get a couple of these things in place, like your other businesses. But I mean, I think we could riff on a bunch of other stuff too, like
just started
building culture and all that. We just started, but I mean, I just wanted to get your broader story out there. And
awesome, thanks.
And I think for any entrepreneur on here that this will eventually reach, like. They should know that you're accessible.
Absolutely.
You're a good guy to talk with, especially obviously in the Bend area, but by phone or whatever. And they'll get some good advice along the way. So love your journey, man. Keep it up.
Appreciate it.
And thanks for giving back. And for those out there, we'll catch you on the next one. Have a good one.
That was a crazy